Hi, I'm Avi Friedman, Rabbi at Congregation Or Shalom-Summit. I don't know about you, but last week I found myself fascinated by the story of NPR raccoon. NPR stands for Minnesota Public Radio, and she got her name because an NPR reporter was watching out his office window as a small raccoon started making her way up the UBS Plaza, one of St. Paul's tallest buildings at 25 stories high, and he started tweeting about her. After all, a downtown office building is not exactly the natural habitat for a raccoon. Now, some people were rooting her on because raccoons can be pretty cute, but others were rooting against her because they see a raccoon as a menace, getting in people's garbage and spreading disease. She had no food or water on her way. She didn't take the most direct route. She made it up to the 23rd floor. She went back down to the 17th before beginning her ascent again. Ultimately, though, she did make it to the roof, where she found food and water waiting for her, and then she was safely transported to a woodsy but undisclosed location. NPR raccoon's journey is not so different from the journey of our Israelite ancestors from Egypt to the Promised Land. First of all, the Israelites were out of their element. They were not in the familiar but oppressive Egypt, and they were not yet in the Promised Land either. They were migrants. They were refugees. Food and water were issues for the Israelites as well. We read about Moses striking the rock in this week's Torah portion. In previous weeks, we read about how the Israelites missed the food in Egypt. Like NPR raccoon, not everyone was rooting for the Israelites to make it. In this week's portion, Moses sent messengers to the king of Edom, a descendant of Esau, the twin of Jacob. The message was a request: allow us to cross your country. The response was swift and cruel. You shall not pass through us, or else we will go out against you with the sword. Needless to say, this does not make the Edomites look particularly good. And we know that the Edomites would develop into one of Israel's great enemies. But we also know that the Israelites ultimately made it to the Promised Land, despite this unnecessary obstacle placed in their way by the Edomites. Like the NPR raccoon, the Israelites had to go out of their way before resuming their journey to the Promised Land. It would have been a much easier journey if the Edomite king had responded with kindness instead of cruelty. Now it's with tongue firmly in cheek that I compare our ancestors' journey to a raccoon climbing an office building. The better comparison is clearly the journeys of modern-day migrants and refugees who see this country, the United States of America, as their promised land. Just as many Jews, including my grandparents, viewed this country over the last century. People come to our borders seeking to escape oppression, short on food and water, having traveled a circuitous route, begging us to let them in. And we have to decide if we want to be like the Edomite king or if we want to be better than that. We know that that episode with the Edomite king was not the last time that our people asked a country for safe passage or refuge. We know how many times we were turned away. So as Americans and Jews, we have an obligation to speak out so that our country does not follow the example of the Edomite king. Instead, we should help our country to follow God's explicit instructions as stated in the book of Exodus. You shall not oppress the stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers.